Big Cockroach from Kip Addotta on Revenge of the 80s Radio. The mastermind behind such classics as Wet Dreams, Life in the Slaw Lane, and Hungover All Over Again. And I'm happy to have Kip with me on the phone right now. Welcome to Revenge of the 80s, Kip.
Hi, Chris. Good day, good evening, good afternoon, and good morning.
And good everything, because we're broadcast around the world, so we don't know what time it is anywhere.
Right. We're simply sending a signal out into the universe. Where it falls, we do not know.
And we're hoping the aliens don't always think that this is the best example of all humanity, but at least up there in the top 75. We'll just say that.
Let's say better than most.
Okay, yeah. As I said, the top 75, top 52, something like that. Kip, not only did I listen to your music throughout my life, as many of our listeners have, I also remember seeing some of your stand-up on television. So I have to ask you, how did you get into comedy?
I was back in Rockford, Illinois, with a wife and 3 children, and I was making about $20 a month less than I needed to pay my bills. And one night, I was brooding over a schooner of beer at bowling alley, wondering what in the world I was going to do with myself and my family. And I decided to follow my dream. I had always been interested in stand-up comedy. I would see these men, women on television and think, what a marvelous way to make a living. And I felt that I had some of the wherewithal to do that because I used humor in my life to avoid getting punched in the nose a lot. And so I left my schooner of beer and I walked over to a phone booth. You remember phone booths, don't you?
Yeah, I used to change my clothes in those things.
Yes. Yes. And I called my wife, Lynn. I said, Lynn, let's have an adventure. She said, what do you mean? I said, well, the Tonight Show just moved from New York to Los Angeles. And so let's go to Los Angeles. I want to be a comedian. And my wife said to me, let's do it.
Kip, that sounds like a good leap of faith, a very interesting one. When did you find out, hey, I am a pretty funny guy, I can make a go of this?
I never thought that I was a funny guy. I thought that I was capable of humor, but most of all, I had a sense of humor. I enjoyed humor. For instance, I might be a wonderful fan of a violin player and just love to hear the violin played. But that does not mean that I can play the violin. It only means that I appreciate and enjoy it. Now, we're starting off on a long, long road, Chris, because you asked a question that to me is the beginning of a tremendously long journey. And I'm trying to answer it without chewing up your entire show.
Nah, let's take the drive.
Anyway, the wife and my 3 kids and our little French poodle got in an old Pontiac station wagon. And first of all, I had a band. First of all, let me give you a little background. I have musical background, which many comedians have, at least the good ones, if I may.
Okay.
And I had musical background because in my heart of hearts, I always kind of knew that I would end up doing this, no matter how much effort it would take. So I started a band so that I would have some stage experience. And as luck would have it, I was the weakest link in the band as lead singer, but the rest of the band was as solid as bedrock. I mean, they were heavy cats, and somehow I arranged to acquire their services. And so we traveled around the Midwest, and we played Holiday Inns, 5 shows a night, and the like, the dinner supper clubs, and so on and so forth. And again, 5 shows a night, 45 minutes on, 15 minutes off. And we worked some comedy into the sets. In other words, we were a show band, not just a bunch of guys up there with instruments doing a song and then kind of wandering around the stage for 4 minutes while they figure out what they're going to do next. We always had a game plan. We knew where we were going to be at every minute during that 45. And so when I made that phone call to my wife, I sold the band equipment, and we sold everything we owned, and ended up with about $1,700 in cash, an old station wagon, 3 kids, a dog, my wife and I, heading west with no prospects at all. Nothing. I didn't know anybody, and other than having some stage experience in the band, I didn't know anything. I only knew that this is what my calling was. So it was a conscious decision on my part, made by someone who desperate men take desperate measures, and I was a desperate man. So I rolled the dice.
Kip Addotta is with me on Revenge of the 80s Radio. So you take a trip from Rockford, Illinois, all the way to L.A. How did you get your first gig down that way?
My first wife had passed away, and I had remarried. I had found a new mom for my kids. And there was a Social Security death benefit from my first wife, Mary, of $213 a month. And we did indeed find a home, a 2-bedroom, 1-bath home to rent in Van Nuys, California for $213 a month. And I started immediately looking for some way to have some cash rolling in. And I went everywhere and found myself across the street from the NBC studios in Burbank, and there at a restaurant called Chadney's, I went in and asked if they could use any help. And the fellow there, the manager, said, "Yeah, we need a guy to park cars during the noon lunch hour," which was like a 2.5-hour span. I said, "Well, I'd like to have that job." It was perfect for me because it was during the lunch hour, and it left my evenings free. A lot of things fall into place here. It's uncanny, really. So I got a job. I started working, and one day, a lady, pretty little lady, came over to me and said, and remember, we're right across the street from NBC. And she said to me, "Have you ever thought about doing television?" I said, doing some acting. I said, "Well, sure." I lied. And she said, "Well, my husband produces a soap opera called Days of Our Lives. And we need someone to play a piano player in the show on a regular basis. And why don't you go over and meet my husband tomorrow and see what he thinks?" So I did. The next day, after my parking cars gig was done, I walked across the street to NBC, and I met with the producer of Days of Our Lives. And he liked me, and he put me to work. And I was playing a piano player. Of course, I play no musical instrument, and as a matter of fact, can't even blow a whistle. But the way it was shot, and I'm sure you know, the way it was shot, it looked like I was indeed playing the piano. And it got me some income, number one. And those things shoot early in the morning, so it didn't even mess with my parking cars job. And it got some money coming in. It also got me my union card with after American Federation of Radio and Television. And it allowed me to be on the set of a soap opera with cameras, with actors, with crew. And I was a sponge. I was soaking up everything that was around me. As a matter of fact, between takes, I would go backstage to a dead camera and stand there and talk to the camera, simply to have the experience of talking to a camera. And I just took every event and pointed it in the direction of my ultimate goal, which was not to become a well-known name. It never occurred to me that I would become a well-known name or well-known in any way. I was simply wanted to work on being funny. I thought that's what the deal was. And then about 2 weeks into this job of parking cars, a fellow told me, I was talking about my ambitions of getting into stand-up comedy, and he said, well, you know, there's a new comedy club that just opened up. It's called the Comedy Store on Sunset Boulevard. You got to go down there. So, well, that very night, I was there. And I signed up to go on, and about 1 o'clock in the morning, after almost everybody had left, they indeed put me on stage. And I did about 4 or 5 minutes of silly things, but I at least got my feet wet. So that's how I began the long journey to my goal.
Chris Cordani here with Kip Addotta on Revenge of the 80s Radio. Straight ahead, we'll talk with Kip about his comedic style, wet dreams, the Slaw Lane, and much, much more. Wet Dream on Revenge of the 80s Radio from our guest, Kip Addotta. Kip?
So I said to her, with that attitude, you can untie yourself. And I left the hotel room. She's the one who wanted to go to Mexico.
So, Kip, your comedic style was very unique. How did you come up with it?
Well, the first thing I did was ignorance is bliss, first of all. I had no game plan, but I was willing to watch and listen and ask advice. And many, many, many of the best, the finest, most famous stand-up comedians in the world were so kind to me to answer my silly questions. And one of them was Mr. Jack Benny. Now, Mr. Benny, I saw Mr. Benny at NBC Studios during the taping of Days of Our Lives, and I walked up to him and said, Mr. Benny, my name is Kip Addotta, and I'm a fledgling comedian. Do you have any advice for me? And he looked up and to the right and thought. And he said, why, yes, young man, I do. Remember, silence is your friend. Now, Chris, I not only told you that story, I used the technique on you, didn't I?
I think you did.
Yes, I used silence in that little snippet of a story. And that silence became uncomfortable, didn't it?
I would say so. A little awkward silence, though, it gives me
It's a little awkward. Yeah. Neither one of us is talking. It's a little awkward.
It's like my home life.
That's what he meant. When in my comedy styling, all right, the style of comedy, the way I seem to be on stage, I use my ears a lot more than I use my mouth. I listen to the audience, and they give me the timing. If comedians would only understand that you cannot create timing without knowing what an audience is thinking, doing, seeing, listening to. Everything I do, everything I've created is always in my mind's eye. When I'm writing something, in my mind's eye, I am not standing on stage. I'm sitting in the audience. And everything I've ever created has been done sitting in the audience rather than on stage. Now, giving myself the time to pause, that silence, it does something. It's a bit of a control technique, because when I stop talking, people lean forward, because generally speaking, an audience is nervous for you. They think always put themselves in the performer's shoes. Oh my God, what would I do? It's human nature. So if I pause, they lean forward, and I'm listening. And I'm waiting for that moment when they're about to say, holy mackerel, man, say something. And that's when I deliver the first line. And that little technique supercharges the joke. Now, obviously, I thought the joke was funny, or I wouldn't have put it in the show. But that little cheap technique takes something that may have been a C or a B line and makes it into an A+ line. So it's not about what you say, it's about how you're saying it. Mr. Steve Allen once said, a comic says funny things, a comedian says things funny.
Wise words from Steve Allen. Kip, that is rather evident. Your pauses, the silence, rather evident in Wet Dream.
It's evident in pretty much everything I do, because when I work on stage in one with no musicians, the audience is my band, and I'm listening to the audience. When I'm in the studio recording, of course, we have a drum. We have the drum tracks. We have bass tracks. We've got rhythm tracks, and so on and so forth. So I'm listening, and I always leave space to rest the audience. You know, one night I was on stage in a nightclub in Atlanta, Georgia, and I learned something rather profound that night. I was getting a laugh every 8 seconds, and I work it, so I do the research. I know how many laughs, when they come, because I record every show, but more important than recording the show, I listen to the show. And I had a time. I'm getting a major laugh, not a titter. I'm talking about at least a 70% of the audience is laughing. That's what I call a laugh. Anything below that is not really a laugh. And I'm getting a major laugh every 8 seconds. And I am rocking and rolling up there, and I'm thinking, this is wonderful, wow. Well, about 15 feet in front of me, a guy, just at the point where I was going to deliver a punchline, this guy took a drink of his drink, whatever that was. and I delivered the punchline, and he inhaled to laugh. And when he inhaled to laugh, he swallowed an ice cube that got caught in his throat, and he died. He aspirated in his mask and fell over and died.
He died laughing.
Well, he died attempting to laugh, but my point in this whole thing, why I brought this up is, the lesson I learned that night was that I've got to rest the audience. It's like a jockey rests a horse in the middle of a race. You burst out of the gate. You burst onto the track. Then you hold the horse back a little bit. Then you bring it forward. Then you hold it back a little. I learned that I must rest to the audience. And again, bringing them to a certain point and then letting them rest, letting them calm down. There's a whole thing. I mean, it's so not about the jokes. It is so not about the jokes that it's difficult to explain.
And that's how you got them to laugh on Make Me Laugh, huh?
Thank you. Absolutely.
The game show.
Make Me Laugh was the best thing I ever did. God bless George Foster, the producer of that show. You know, when he called me up to ask me to perform on Make Me Laugh, and I did 517 of those, by the way, I asked him, I said, you know, you know me as a monologist. Do you think that, are you trying to put a monologist on your show? Because if that's what you're trying to do, I'm not your God. And he said, Kip, absolutely not. You can do anything you want on the show. I said, good, then I'll accept the gig. And I would literally do anything I wanted to, because the show was so material intensive that there was no such thing as an idea you could say, well, that's not good enough. You had to do everything. And some of the ideas I got that I didn't have much faith in were some of the best reactions I got. So, like I say, I had complete reign. I could do anything I wanted. But Chris, your observation is correct. I would walk out and not say anything, and let the tension build up. The contestant would laugh. But also, you should know that my job was not to make the contestant laugh. That was the guys that we were working under. My job was to make the audience in the studio laugh and the viewing audience laugh. I didn't care if the contestant laughed or not. As a matter of fact, I didn't like it when they laughed because it cut my camera time.
Yeah, you had 60 seconds, right, to get the guy to laugh?
Right,
yes.
60 seconds to make them laugh. And believe me, I was in no hurry for that to happen.
Kip Addotta is with me on Revenge of the 80s Radio. You were a host also of a game show on the Playboy Channel, Everything Goes.
Everything Goes, including your clothes. The one with the most on at the end of the game wins. Yes, on the Playboy Channel, I hosted this show, and it was ridiculous. And I had a panel of celebrities that would, to be honest with you, I don't even remember the mechanics of the show, but I hosted it for 3 years, the full run of the show. And I personally thought that we were going to be picketed for doing the show. I thought that the audience, the viewing audience, would be outraged, and that did not happen.
Now, Kip, you were a game show host, a stand-up comedian, and a very successful one at that. But you really made your mark in comedy and music history with your, well, comedy music.
Well, it was, thank you for not calling them parodies, because I don't do parodies.
No, they aren't parodies. They were original tunes.
Right. Original music, original words. I've written 12 songs in my life. I've had 4 charted top 10 songs. That's a pretty darn good percentage rate. And a lot of luck went along with it. There's agents, there's managers, there's A&R people, there's promoters. Everything, the entire universe has to be all lined up perfectly for things to happen. And luckily for me, they did happen. And I put my all into what I do. I don't play. This is not a game. I'm deadly serious about what I do. And for instance, the first musical thing that I did was Wet Dream, and some DJs would call it the Fish Song, and other DJs would call it the Gulf Stream Song, because they were afraid to say the words Wet Dream on the air.
Even though it was sung in the chorus. I mean, come on, you know?
Well, yeah, but I purposely gave my songs provocative names because I knew something about DJs, and what I knew was they would say, "Oh, I can't play that on the air," but they would take it home and listen to it, and then realize that yes, indeed, they could play it on the air. So everything is a con, Chris. Everything. This interview I'm doing with you right now, complete con.
I'm fine with that. As long as we're entertaining, it's fine, right?
Why let the facts get in your way?
No. But in fact, Kip Addotta, of course, Kip with me on Revenge of the 80s radio, even though Wet Dreams had a lot of airplay around the nation, with your other music, Dr. Demento was a big help because I grew up with Dr. Demento, and a lot of hearing you with the other songs, Your Life in the Slaw Lane, The Big Cockroach, Captain of the Sofa Team, I Saw Daddy Kissing Santa Claus. They were very popular requests on Dr. Demento's show.
But they were popular. They were popular before Dr. Demento. It's a pertinent point you make. That gives me the opportunity to explain with all humility that my songs garnered a lot of listeners to the Dr. Demento show. And he, yes, indeed, gave my songs a lot of exposure, especially, as you said, not necessarily the top 10 hits, but also the other songs. They all charted, but he gave a voice to songs like I'm So Miserable Without You, It's Just Like Having You Around, which was written because of my divorce. And he gave vent to songs like My Baby Has to Have a Tattoo and My Baby's in Jail, and all the little ditties that I did. I do have him to thank for that, and I appreciate it. As a matter of fact, I just finished being interviewed for the Dr. Demento story, a movie about Dr. Demento. And yes, I certainly appreciate and thank him. But on the other hand, I was supplying him with, content.
Well, as I said before, a lot of your songs were very well requested. I would hear recordings of people saying, I get demented on this station. I want to hear Kip Addotta singing. And you just name the song. People just ask for many of your songs.
Some people do, some people don't. I don't deal with that currency. 17% of the population of our country doesn't know who the President of the United States is. There are people that know who I am, and there are people that do not know who I am. I'm fine with that. All I know is whenever I go to a party, I'm the only one there with a last name. I meet Mary, Ted, Phil, Chris, Tom, Barbara, and then I'm introduced as Kip Addotta.
Kip Addotta with me on Revenge of the 80s Radio. Now, your fans, your longtime fans, and, of course, your new ones can get your CDs and DVDs on your website, kipaddotta.com.
Kipaddotta.com. Thank you, Chris. My last name is my real name. My first name is my birth name, my given name, Kip Addotta, Addotta, Addotta. I'm a full-blooded Sicilian. There are few of us left, but I'm one of them.
You can pick up Kip Addotta's Live from Maximum Security DVD, CDs like I Saw Daddy Kissing Santa Claus, that one, a great bunch of selections like My Baby's in Jail, like you mentioned, It's the Liquor, Hungover All Over Again. You got The Trouble Hole.
That's the CD, The Trouble Hole, yeah, which of course is our mouth.
The Comedian of the United States, one of my old favorites, Life in the Slaw Lane.
It came out with Purple Rain. I'm a big fan of Prince's, by the way. I appreciate his work and his style, but I whipped his butt for 8 months on the chart. And
you could also rap pretty well too. I got to tell you that.
Well, I'm okay, you know. I mean, I can satirize rapping, but oh, gee whiz, that's not my bag. That is not my bag. I'm not a rapper in the sense that it is evolved into now, kind of a combination of what they call hip hop, I guess, which is a combination of singing, kind of, sorta, and rapping.
Kip, on your blog, you have a couple of interesting points here. I was reading some of the most recent, at time of taping, of course. One of the most recent posts you put on was a very interesting one. It's headlined The Brass Ring. It brings to a point that a lot of great ideas don't get to see the light of day for a long time. If you want to get them out there, you have to be very, very persistent. And you really bring a different and very interesting perspective and a lot of education to people who don't understand why sometimes a very good idea doesn't get out there.
Listen, it's a long road to hoe to get anything done in Hollywood. If it hasn't, as I say in the article, by the way, I wrote that this morning, if it's new, the answer is no. They don't like taking chances with anything that hasn't been done before. So there's a lot of plagiarism and a lot of rubber stamping and copycatting, and I mean, when the movie Heat came out, all of a sudden for 2 years, every movie that came out of a certain ilk was, the music in it was very Heat-like. And there's just a lot of plagiarism. It's a lot easier to copy someone's work than it is to actually create something of your own and then to sell it. I'm in the middle right now, as we speak, pitching a television show idea that's a bit of a left curve. And again, I always look at everything from the audience's point of view. If I didn't have an audience, I wouldn't create it. So I'm very calculating in what I do. So that puts another layer of difficulty on it. And of course, and I knew this, the problem that the show is having is also the reason why it will be eventually sold. It's because it hasn't been done. As soon as you introduce a project to a producer or network or cable company, the first thing they do, because it's the easiest thing, you can always depend on people to be lazy, is the first thing they do is what successful show is it like? And if it's not like any successful show, you're going to have a lot of problems. Wear your own clothes. And a lot of, I don't have to tell you that a lot of what we see is just ripped off from the BBC. We have a long history of simply copying shows on the BBC and then releasing them here as our own.
I wish they would have copied the Blackadder or the Young Ones, but hey, they got some ones.
But if you look at the Top Gear, the BBC version of Top Gear, and then you look at the American version of Top Gear, why it pales in comparison. And the examples are endless, but I'll pick up the most. All in the Family was not an original American show. It was
a British show, yes.
When I came out with Wet Dream, I had a dog from every town jumping on that theme. They were doing the Candy Bar song, and they were doing this song and that song, and trying to get on my coattails as if this was some music trend, and it wasn't. It was just two songs, Wet Dream and Life in the Slaw Lane, that I did, and then I moved away from it because I didn't want to have to do that for the rest of my life.
Nobody wants to be typecast.
Right.
Kip, I wish we had a lot more time to talk, but I'd love to have you on again, especially when your autobiography comes out. And yes, I want to mention that.
That would be wonderful. That's why I have your name in my iPhone.
Perfect.
Because when I am ready to release, I will certainly call you and ask to be on your show again, if I may.
And if I don't hear from you, I'll call you anyway.
Thank you.
Kip, thank you very much for coming on. Once again, the autobiography is coming from Kip Addotta. He's working on it. You can pick up CDs, DVDs from Kip and check out his website, kipaddotta.com. That's KIPADDOTTA.com. Let's play another track from Kip, Life in the Slaw Lane.